Truth be told, Arsenal's pre-season friendly against Borussia Dortmund was not the greatest watch, but it did help me to realise a really interesting dynamic. Watching the game for the first time, I noticed an interesting link-up between Odegaard, Havertz and Gyokeres, and I was thinking, surely we've seen this somewhere before, right? Well, given that statement, you can imagine my shock when I realised upon further research that those three players have never started a game for Arsenal together. As far as my research goes, that's a true fact, but if I am wrong, please somebody do let me know in the comments below. So, this revelation is important because it gives us a new dynamic that we can examine, and we can see how this trio in midfield and attack can potentially create attacking solutions for Arsenal, bolster their creativity, forward output, and maybe even open up the centre of the pitch more. In this video, we'll first be analysing how this trio could work theoretically, and that just means analysing their individual traits, qualities, strengths, weaknesses, and where they do or don't complement each other, so that we can speculate as to how they'll play as a unit. After the theoretical, we'll move to the practical, and that just means using actual real match footage from the game against Dortmund to see how the three of them got on and what kind of potential attacking dynamics they can bring to Arsenal together. So first we're going to be looking at the players individually as we stated before, and we're going to start with Martin Odegaard. Now Odegaard a couple years back would have been known as Arsenal's creative outlet. He would have been known as the skill workshop in attack. He was renowned for his link up with Saka and Ben White on that right hand side. Even as early as 21-22, before White was moved to right back, you could see a little connection between Odegaard and Saka. And then once the 22-23 season hit, you can see Odegaard, White and Saka were really strong on that side, and it continued into 23-24. Once he was hit by some injury problems, people kind of saw his quality drop off a little bit. It also could be due to the changing Premier League, the move towards physicality. So either way, Odegaard's talents don't lie so much anymore in that creative final third output that people used to think was his bread and butter. And that's just because of the changes to the league. But what we do know about him is all those qualities on the ball he still has. His ball control is second to none. His passing and his vision, his dribbling, that close control, the agility, the movement. And nowadays it's more to do with his control and tempo setting though. So he'll be dropping deeper, knitting passes, short passes, and helping Arsenal progress up the pitch. And that's why Mikel Arteta loves him so much, because he can help Arsenal in the build-up. What he does like, however, people find nowadays his creative output in attack is lowered, and that's because of a lack of urgency. Sometimes he might dwell on the ball too long without releasing that punchy pass in behind or pulling the trigger on that shot. We did see last season, in terms of his shooting, he did try and pull the trigger a bit earlier compared to the season before, where people were very frustrated with him. But that's still something that people do complain about with Odegaard. As well as that, he's not the fastest player. I did say earlier he was quite an agile dribbler, but I more mean the ball kind of stays glued to his feet, but he's not the paciest. He's not going to take you on down the wing and take on his man. It's more in those tight areas, getting you out of the tight areas with his ball control. And one thing that's definitely lacking from his game is strength and physicality, and that's why he can so often be bossed out of games. I mean, I remember away clashes against Nottingham Forest, he was being dominated by the likes of Elliot Anderson in midfield, and that's potentially why people have seen a drop-off in quality, because he just doesn't seem to have the physicality to keep up with some of the stronger players in the Premier League at times. So that's Odegaard covered, in my opinion. Let's move on to Kai Havertz. Now, Havertz is a really interesting player because it's really hard to profile him at times, the same way it was difficult for a player like Thomas Muller. Again, I'm not making a comparison in quality, because I know a lot of people online will just hear a name and say, oh, you calling him better than him? No, I'm just trying to compare their traits, use one of them to draw a comparison to traits that you see in the other. So yeah, I do see some of those qualities in Havertz. He's hard to profile, and that's because, like the Raumdeuter, a lot of his strength comes in his ability to create space with his movement and runs. He investigates the space, as they say. On top of that, yes, obviously that's his biggest strength, his movement, his runs. He's really intelligent with that, and he can create these spaces inside the box. He's also good as a reference when Arsenal want to play long. He's tall, so he can hold up the ball, which is great because it allows Arsenal a way out. So his height, his strength, his physicality definitely help Arsenal, especially after he's bulked up a bit. On top of that, I do think he's one of Arsenal's most intelligent players. When he does find those spaces, he's best when he has players around him because he has a good understanding of other players around him to the point where he's able to just flick a little pass into them from inside the box or just work really well with his teammates is what I mean. So that's why I say he has good game IQ, good link-up play. His weaknesses, and this is why I've been kind of hesitant in my praise, because even though I've said he's had good link-up, his passing isn't the best, his dribbling isn't the best, and those are linked because he's just a really awkward player. In terms of his movement, he just feels really clunky and awkward. Sometimes when he has the ball ahead of him and space ahead of him, he can glide, but it looks like turning is difficult for him. Dribbling with the ball close at his feet, he can lose control sometimes. Passing as well. And that also comes into his finishing as well. He does seem to take one too many touches sometimes to set himself, or just miss the target a lot of the time in big moments sometimes. Even though he does put away a lot of good chances, he also does miss a lot of chances as well. So yeah, Havertz is a really difficult player to grasp sometimes, which is why a lot of what I'm saying might just sound like I'm not committing to one strength or quality here. I'm like on the fence about a lot of these things, but I think his strength is definitely his movement, his runs, and his match IQ, and his weaknesses definitely come with his finishing, agility, dribbling, all that kind of technical stuff. And I do find when he has played in midfield, even though he's a hard worker, he can be a bit rush. He can commit some fouls where he's just tugging of the shirt when he doesn't need to do that. He can get breezed by a bit easily. So that's how I feel about Kai Havertz. And the final man of the trio is the Swedish striker Viktor Gyokeres. Now, I think this one will be pretty quick. We know his strengths and weaknesses. His strengths are his ball striking is probably the best in the Arsenal squad. He can really leather it when he's able to get the ball out of his feet and strike it. And you can see that in dead ball situations like penalties, where a lot of the time the keeper will dive the right way, but there's such venom in the strike that it's already past the keeper by the time they've dived. Now, on top of that, we know from his days at Sporting, his channel running is one of his biggest strengths. He played there when they played a 3 at the back system, so a lot of the time the wing backs would find him. When he'd run into the channels, they'd play a slide ball through to him, and a lot of the time that was on the left hand side and he'd be cutting in from there. And that's the kind of thing we saw in his first goal for Arsenal against Leeds, but Arsenal don't really utilise that so much because we are one of the worst sides in transition, to be honest. On top of that, he's a very hard worker. I mean, he runs himself into the ground for 90 minutes. He'll run for you, he'll press for you, he'll put pressure on, he'll give it his all. And his finishing is pretty good as well. It's not perfect, he does miss chances like every player, but again, compared to a lot of the players in the Arsenal squad, he is a good finisher. Moving on to his weaknesses, his dribbling, it's just not great, is it? I mean, going back to that first goal for Arsenal against Leeds, he was able to dribble into the box there, but he has this really I I don't know if this is the right way to describe it, but he just kind of like bumbles into the box where the ball's, everyone has that one friend where you don't know how they're keeping the ball, it's just getting stuck to their feet, but they keep going. That's what that goal reminds me of. And a lot of the time you can see in his dribbling, that's how it is. He's really awkward on the ball, kind of heavy-footed, and yeah, really awkward to watch. And it's not like it's that effective all the time either. If it was awkward but effective, I wouldn't really be putting it down as that big of a weakness just because it's not easy on the eye. But he does lose the ball a lot because his ball control just isn't the greatest. On top of that, agility as well. If you push him out wide, which happened in that Dortmund game a lot, it's better for him to try and just win a corner than to turn back and maybe find somebody, because by the time he's turned, if the defender's tight to him, they're going to get a foot in. On top of that, yeah, his hold-up play isn't great. We did see some improvement towards the back end of last season, which makes me think perhaps it can improve, but we did also see a lot of poor hold-up play from him, where he was getting bullied, kind of throwing himself to the ground a bit too early. And he's a strong guy. He's supposed to be quite big and strong, so it would be nice to see him kind of try and ride those challenges some more. And apart from that, his passing isn't great either. Anything with his back to goal, where he needs to turn, play a pass, can be quite wayward. We have seen some good passing from him though, but it's always in bits. We saw him play a lovely pass out wide against, was it Fulham? Out to Trossard for Arsenal's second goal, was it? Someone please remind me in the comments, but we have seen some good passing from him. We've seen some times where he has actually been able to hold it up, turn and play a pass, but I'm just saying the consistency of it kind of puts it down as a weakness for me, because he is very inconsistent when it comes to performing these actions to the degree that we would want to be able to build attacks. So that's how I feel about Viktor Gyokeres. Now, if we just look at the traits of these three players, we see that when you put them together, they do have quite a complete skill set. And what I mean by that is, where one player is lacking, another of the players in the trio will make up for it. And on top of that, there are traits that some players have that others in the trio will be able to maximize because of their own traits that complement that. Now, what I mean is, for example, Gyokeres, we talked about his channel running, and we talked about Havertz's great movement and runs in behind and finding pockets of space. Odegaard's vision and passing are going to allow for those traits to be maximized because they can make those runs and they know they'll have somebody there with the vision to play them in behind. Havertz's poor finishing in the trio can be compensated by Gyokeres' good finishing and his ball striking, whereas Gyokeres' poor hold-up play and his passing are compensated for by Havertz's good hold-up play and his ability to find teammates after holding it up due to his good link-up play and understanding. Now, obviously, we're not talking about MSN, we're not talking about the most complete attacking trio, we're not talking about Ribery, Robben and Lewandowski. We're just talking about a trio that we think could be able to help improve Arsenal's attacking options. So I'm not saying that this trio is perfect. They don't always complement each other, and not all their traits cover each other that well. But I definitely see potential there. But enough speculation. Let's actually put it to the test and have a look at some of the match footage from the first half an hour against Borussia Dortmund before Havertz and Odegaard was subbed off. So a lot of people have said that Havertz was just playing in midfield because Arteta might have a lack of options, given the absence of Declan Rice. The recent arrival of Bruno Guimaraes meant that he was still waiting for a lot of his top players to come back from rest after the World Cup, like Eze as well. But I do feel as though, watching the game, there's definitely something about that trio of Odegaard, Havertz and Gyokeres that Arteta might be exploring there. And I say that because we have seen Havertz a lot of the time play as the left 8 and Odegaard is the right 8, and they kind of create chances down those sides. But today there was less focus on that and more focus on Odegaard playing behind in midfield and Havertz kind of playing as a second striker or just alongside Gyokeres as a striker. When Arsenal were pressing, because of the work rate of Victor Gyokeres and because of the way Odegaard knows how to coordinate that press, it was Odegaard and Gyokeres who were most advanced when Dortmund had the ball at the back. But that meant that Havertz was dropping into midfield at that time, which is something I said earlier I don't like because I feel defensively they can breeze by him and he can be quite rash. However, we saw when Arsenal got onto the ball themselves, Havertz was no longer in that midfield roll off the ball. Now that Arsenal were on the ball, he was up there with Gyokeres, and the two were staying really close together a lot of the time. Yes, sometimes they would split so that they could make some runs, but a lot of the time they'd be just one slightly ahead of the other on the same side. Now, I actually appreciate the sort of second striker model where there are two of them playing together, close together, one just working off the other. And I think that's good in this case because, as I said earlier, Gyokeres, he's not the best at turning with his back to goal. So sometimes when he receives the ball and he needs to turn, even if it's not with his back to goal, if he just needs to turn to be facing the goal from side on, it can be hard for him to get the ball out of his feet in time and defenders can recover. So I feel like having Havertz near him to work off could really work because Havertz could make that run. And as we know, I've said his game IQ, his ability to just play those little flicks in and around the box to his teammates. It doesn't have to be the most line-breaking pass of all time. It's just a small flick. He knows where his man is. And all of a sudden, Gyokeres would just be able to hit that ball that's already facing the goal for him, just run onto it and smash it. So I feel like having the two of them up there together could really allow one of them to be the facilitator and the other to be the finisher. And that makes good use of their strengths and weaknesses, because Havertz isn't the best finisher. So having him go in and find those spaces, as he so often does, and then have someone he can just lay it off to tee up. We've seen it before against Man City in the 5-1 game, the way he was able to tee up Odegaard. A lot of the time he is looking to pass Havertz. So if we're giving him someone close to him where he can just flick it off to them, that could really work wonders for Arsenal. Of course, all this play was being made possible by Martin Odegaard. I felt he was definitely the best player in that first half an hour, in my opinion at least, because he was spraying passes short and long. He was dropping deep to help Arsenal in the build-up play. He'd be able to play over the top. He'd be able to come to the right-hand side and play through passes. And he was just really always looking to find those front two and doing what he does best, in my opinion. If we look at some specific moments of play, we can see Odegaard dropping deep in the centre or centre left of the pitch, deep in his own half. He just turns when receiving the ball and plays a really nice ball, hooks it over the top into Havertz. Havertz is out wide, and this is why I want him and Gyokeres to stay a bit closer. Maybe if they were a bit closer together, Havertz would be able to just slide the ball through to Gyokeres, and Gyokeres would be able to run onto it and hit it. But Havertz is a bit further away from Gyokeres. He comes a bit wider, and then that means that he's going to have to cross it into the box. And there's not a lot of pace on the cross. It's a difficult header for Gyokeres, and it goes wide. But positive play from the two. We see more chances like this again, this time closer to the right-hand side and a bit further up the pitch. On the ground, Odegaard turns and plays a ball through, where he finds Kai Havertz. And now Kai Havertz and Gyokeres really have a good chance here to create a scoring opportunity from wide. But again, this time they get a bit further apart, and it kind of seems like there was a bit of confusion in the communication or coordination. Havertz kind of rolls it slowly across, maybe expecting Gyokeres to burst onto it and try and just tap that in. But Gyokeres was just pulling a bit further back, as if expecting the ball would be right onto his foot rather than him having to burst forward for that. So it just ends up rolling into the keeper's arms, and it was, again, a pretty good chance. But this is pre-season, not everything has to be perfect. We're seeing good patterns of play and good movement. Now, we've seen play generated down the left, we've seen play generated down the right, but also something that Arsenal don't do a lot is attack from the centre, and we see them attack from the centre with this trio again at the heart of it. This time it's actually Odegaard who's bursting forward as the last man to receive the ball just outside the box, so he's actually the one who slipped through on goal this time. We see Havertz actually taking a deeper role in midfield, and he's just able to turn and play a ball into Gyokeres, and this is what I want Gyokeres to do more of. And of course it requires for other players to allow him to do this, and that is to take less touches and just flick the ball in behind like we saw here. This time obviously you need a player to make the run in behind so that you can flick it in behind, and we see Odegaard make a run, so it's just Havertz plays it to Gyokeres. Gyokeres a bit of space from the defender comes a bit closer to him, which opens up that space. Odegaard bursts into it, and it's just flicked through first time by Gyokeres into Odegaard, and Odegaard's in on goal. He's fouled and he wins a free kick just outside the box. You know, on another day any of these chances could have ended up in the back of the net, but not on this occasion. But what we're seeing here is positive patterns of play from the three, and that's coming down the left, the right and the centre, which is very promising. Now, that's all I was really able to examine in this game. I do think it's very promising because Odegaard and Gyokeres being used as a front two, I really think they can work off each other. And I do think Odegaard, he's just such a talented player. Great range of passing, ball control, understanding of his teammates. So with their movement, Odegaard's passing, it could really create something great, especially if, as a three, they learn how to work better together. They learn, what type of players the others are, the type of runs they're going to be making, and if they gel and mesh a bit more. I do know, obviously, Odegaard and Havertz are supposed to be close friends, which, yes, that does kind of help when it comes to link up and understanding. So hopefully the three can develop that sort of understanding so they can understand who's going to make this certain run at this time, where they're going to be. Just those kind of small things as you get closer that you recognize about your teammates that allows you to almost play without thought sometimes. So those were mainly my thoughts, and that's all we really had time to gather. It was only half an hour of footage and then Odegaard was subbed off. But the last thing I wanted to do in this video is I wanted to talk about how Arsenal can build a team around this trio. If they decide to use this trio, what kind of players around them would best complement this trio. So what I've done here is I've built a pretty typical Arsenal lineup. You can see the squad here. And we've got Havertz in the left eight, Odegaard in the right eight, but obviously in-game Havertz would be closer to Gyokeres as a second striker. We've got Odegaard in the midfield, Rice as a six. We know he's a great unicorn player. He can play there. He can do just about anything. And we've got the back four and we've got our wingers. Now, speaking on the wingers, I was looking at having players to support that trio and get the best out of them. So I was thinking we need Martinelli's pace because Gyokeres doesn't have the best acceleration, nor does Havertz. Odegaard just isn't that quick, and Martinelli's the only one with that kind of explosive pace that we can utilise. So he's adding that which Arsenal are lacking. I do think though it's important to have technical wingers who can take on their man, which is why here I'm going to search up for maybe a Bradley Barker who's on the market, a great touchline winger who's got that technical ability. And Arsenal did play Max Dallman in the Dortmund game, so I'm going to slap him in there. And what I'm going to explain here is, in this type of play style, it's really important to have players who are willing to take on their man on the wing. They're willing to take on their fullback. And that's because when those two strikers are marked and the ball's going to be played out to the wingers, a lot of the time they're not going to be the main focus in getting the ball a lot of the time because of the focus on that front two. So you're really going to need them to have good technical ability. You're going to need them to be able to take on their player so that they can make the most out of the situations that they do have in the end, and they can chip in when it's not working for those front two. So of course, yep, it's important to have those type of technical players in there to support the attack. A perfect player would have been someone like a Vinicius Jr., but he's not really available on the market right now anymore, sadly. I didn't mean to bring that up. But anyway, I'm just illustrating now in the Dortmund game when Odegaard played the ball to Dalman. He beat his man, got across, played it to Gyokeres who hit the bar. And this is the part where I put in Vinicius. We would have loved him because he's elite. He's got pace, that quick explosive pace. He can make something out of nothing. Would have been what we needed. And I can even see at fullback Arteta playing Bruno Gyokeres, inverting him, playing him alongside Rice as the two holding players. Well, they will go forward. You've got punchy passer in there. You've got the legs of Declan Rice in there. And then you can also have the back three become Mosquera, Gabriel, and Ricardo Calafiori. So you can still have your wingers, and then you can have that trio up there. So that's another way Arsenal can choose to operate here. That's where I'm going to end this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hoping to make more content as pre-season goes on and the season begins, so I hope you guys will continue to tune in and let me know in the comments what kind of content you want to see. I'll try and get back to all of you. But yeah, enjoy the rest of pre-season. If you like the video, drop a like and subscribe. It helps me out a lot, and thank you guys so much for watching.